Good evening, it's John the Old Geek back again with another video on gaming. This isn't going to be a review video. This time I'm going to discuss a bit of a hot topic because I've seen an online discussion about this one today, and that is the subject of fumbles. Now in D&D there's no version of D&D ever published where there is a default core mechanic whereby a character screws up if they roll a 1 on a d20. By screwing up, I don't mean just missing, I mean dropping a weapon, or stabbing a colleague, or stabbing themselves. Yet it is probably the single most added house rule in games, based on posts we see on Facebook, on Reddit and other similar platforms. A lot of D&D DMs have added fumble mechanics to their games. For me, if I'm playing and a DM announces that they're going to be using fumbles, that's a red flag, and I will more than likely opt out of playing in that game. That's unless I can persuade them otherwise. So, what are the reasons for me having an issue with adding fumbles? I mean, don't they add that extra bit of tension to combat? Don't they add a bit of extra fun to combat? In my opinion, no, they don't. One key reason is the fact that they typically occur on a roll of a 1 on a d20. That's a flat 5% chance of happening every single time you roll a d20. That means, as a fighter gets better at fighting, and thus they attack more often, and roll the d20 more often, then they have more chances of stabbing their best mate. Now, if you think back to the Lord of the Rings films, look at Legolas wading into hordes of orcs, swinging his sword. Can you imagine what that would have looked like if he had a 5% chance on each swing of stabbing his foot? Or just giving Gimli a friendly stab in the back? Or just hurling his fancy sword into the distance? It's not realistic, it's not sensible that a highly skilled fighter 5% of the time will screw up. But wizards can still fumble their spells, I hear people ask. The simple fact is, the wizard will be rolling that d20 a lot less frequently than the fighter. Thus, if you punish a roll of a 1 on a d20, the most likely class that is going to suffer is the fighter. And what chance does that fighter have of mitigating the chance of screwing up? The only way they can be sure not to screw up more often than anybody else is by not doing their thing, by not fighting. Because quite simply, they have no other way of avoiding looking like a fool. And then there's the really common reply. But, of course, if it happens to player characters, it can happen to the enemies as well. This is a non-argument. Each orc in a battalion of orcs that are attacking the party doesn't matter, because they're not designed to be there for more than 1 or 2 combats. So, if they fall over and smash their shield, break their bow, blunt their axe, it doesn't matter, because they're not going to be there beyond this particular combat. If a paladin with his big 2-handed sword crunches it against a doorway and blunts it, it's going to affect him for the entirety of the rest of that adventure. So, thus, the impact of the fumble on the characters is much greater than the impact of the fumble on the enemies. Another common argument used in favour of bringing fumbles into the game is that they balance out criticals. The only problem is, going back to that fighter who attacks multiple times per round, a great many fumble effects that I've seen involve the character who is doing the fumbling losing their remaining attacks. Thus, one fumble has the possibility of cancelling out the opportunity to balance it out with more critical hits. Fumbles don't balance out criticals at all. The impact they have on criticals is greater than criticals have on the game itself. The fourth point is that whenever I see people publish fumble mechanics, they almost always require extra roles, maybe a confirmation role, or referring to other tables, more calculations, and this will have the effect of slowing down combat. Part of the design of D&D across most of its iterations is that combat is designed to move swiftly. There are much crunchier systems, whereas D&D is not designed to be like that. So you're adding this extra layer of complexity to slow the game down. And the net result is only likely to be frustration. Now, I'm not saying do nothing if somebody dares to roll a 1. By all means, colour it with some interesting description. Make them sound as though they've done something silly. Describe them as slipping, or have the player describe them as slipping, or something similar. Just something that is suitable to the combat or the environment, but just don't punish them mechanically. There's no need for that. You can still have the fun descriptions without the mechanical detriment. Does this mean that I think no game systems should incorporate fumbles? No, it doesn't. There are systems that do it a lot better. As you can see from my t-shirt, I play Call of Cthulhu, and there are fumble mechanics in Call of Cthulhu. Now, the main difference here, sticking with combat to start with, is the fumbles aren't done on tables where you shoot yourselves or you shoot your friend. Most people use guns in Call of Cthulhu, and the fumble means the gun is jammed. Now, depending on what type of gun you have, the chance of fumbling is different. So there is the chance for the player to mitigate the chance of a fumble. With that opportunity there, you can use a small light weapon, which has only got a 1% chance of fumbling, or you can use a bigger, clunkier weapon, which might jam a little bit more often. There's also the option to fire multiple shots, which involves using extra dice, and they're penalty dice. They give you more chance of fumbling. But again, you've made that choice. It's risk and reward, and choice is important. Plus, in Call of Cthulhu, combat is typically very short and over very quickly, and it is very deadly. It doesn't dominate a game session in the same way that it typically does in games of D&D. Fumble results in Cthulhu are more likely to occur during general play in terms of when you're trying to persuade somebody to do something, when you're trying to find some information out. And because Call of Cthulhu is more of a story-based game, the idea then is the story takes a bit of a wrong turn as a result of the fumble. Now, but that wrong turn is unlikely to be immediately lethal, as it would be in combat. There are ways the DM can steer the story, the way the players can react to it. There is that time and that flexibility to adapt to the effect of the fumble, and a good DM will then spin it out. So the fumble can create some really interesting narratives, a lot more so than just a simple slip and a miss in combat. Another system where fumbles work rather nicely is MERP, the Rollmaster system. Again, like Cthulhu, it's percentage based. It gives you more flexibility on the numbers. It's not just a flat 5%. The fumble chance varies from weapon to weapon, and again there's a risk and reward scenario there. The bigger, clumsier weapons do much more damage, so the character makes that choice. Also, the fumble characters only attack once per round. Fighters simply get better and better and better at dealing bigger, fatter criticals. Thus, they get much more competent at fighting, while the fumble chance remains static and is based on the weapon. It's the risk and reward in place, and the fighter's ability improving isn't causing the fumble to be more likely to happen. Plus, the fumble tables in Rollmaster and MERP are very entertaining, and consistently so. They do slow the game down slightly, but it's already a crunchy system. It's not a system that is picked by people who just want to have incredibly fast-flowing cinematic combat. It's a gritty system. It's played more slowly. The numbers involved are bigger. On a typical attack roll, you might be adding 30 to a roll of 62, and then adding another 12 to that, and then maybe subtracting another 14. You've got to do that in your head on each roll. And so the whole system runs a lot more slowly. So having that one extra layer of complexity doesn't have the same impact that it does on a D&D combat. Thus, fumbles work quite nicely in that system. Most of them aren't lethal anyway. The chance of actually hurting yourself in a fumble is very low. So the next time your DM says something like, I want to try bringing fumbles into the game. Here I've got this big juicy table. Show them this video and say to them, no, don't. Next time you see someone post on Reddit, what fumble table do you use? Show them this video and say, none. D&D is better without them. That was me, John, the old geek, once again. If you disagree with me, tell me below. If you do agree with me, tell me below. If you like my video, like, subscribe, share, whatever. See ya.